Yeah.
Would it be possible to take a quick break before I give you my pitch?
Yeah, what's up?
I gotta take a leak. Like,
oh yeah,
boss.
sure.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Don't stop recording.
I'm not gonna stop. I'm just gonna leave that.
I'll just edit this out.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Hello, and welcome to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies and review them and come up with alternate plot lines for how we think those movies could have been even better. I am Nathaniel Draper, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, the very handsome, charming, and talented guitar extraordinaire, Andrew DeYoung.
Thank you. Yeah, had to patch in the guitar extraordinaire into there. I appreciate that. I really do.
Well, I just heard your album, and I love it.
You've heard it in full now
I've heard it in full now, and
yeah.
yes, so you certainly earned the title.
Oh, thank you. I worked really hard on it for 4 years. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my band Robot Philosopher just released our album on January 18th, which was 2 days ago. You can check it out on YouTube or follow us on Facebook. But yeah, it's been really, really nice. The reception's been small because it's our first time and we don't have a lot of following, but it's been really good. The reception, the people have been really kind about it, including yourself. So thank you.
Well, it's a good one. So you should definitely check it out if you're listening to this.
Yeah, and you also have, of course, 3 film festivals coming up for your short film.
That's right. One of them is tomorrow. This will probably have aired after that one.
So it'll be a week and a day.
Okay, so by the time this episode is released, they will all have passed.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But we'll follow up on more screenings in the future.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to say congratulations for that. So,
well, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. But shall we get into this? Today's episode is on
Atlantis: The Lost Empire, the Walt Disney movie. Or I guess just Disney movie, because Walt Disney's dead. Yeah. The Disney movie that came out in 1996. Oh, I usually have it here.
Is it really 96? No way. It's got to be like 2000.
It's 2000s. I've totally got that wrong. I'm double checking here.
Like I was not 4 when this came out.
Because they did it after 2001. So they did it after Hunchback of Notre Dame. And they had done musicals up to that point. And they're like, let's do something different. So they decided to do an action movie instead.
I actually remember being disappointed that this wasn't a musical.
I'm trying to imagine what that would have been like as a musical.
Well, I don't think it needs to be a musical. I absolutely don't think it needs to be a musical. My point is just that I was disappointed that it wasn't a musical because I'm such a huge fan of music in general. And I remember being disappointed that Tarzan wasn't a musical either.
Oh, yeah, Tarzan.
I mean, I know Tarzan is kind of a musical, and it's Phil Collins, and you can't go wrong with Phil Collins.
That's
especially if you're a fan of Genesis. But I do remember like watching Atlantis, or when Atlantis coming out and Tarzan coming out, and being like, I kind of think Disney does a really good job with its musicals. But this movie, for sure, is not wrong. Like, it's such a good movie. Such a good movie. Actually.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
When I picked this movie, or when we picked this movie, I was like, yeah, I remember it being kind of, sloppy and flawed, and now I go back and watch it, and I'm like, this movie is pretty tight. Pretty tight.
It's a fun movie. I mean, I guess, should I do a summary first, and then we can get into what we liked, didn't like about it?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so here we go. So Atlantis it starts off with a prologue where we watch the destruction of the city of Atlantis. And the key things from that are there's this giant tidal wave that comes, and before it's able to destroy absolutely everything, there's the queen of Atlantis, I guess, is sucked up into this floating ball of energy, and that creates a force field around Atlantis, and then when the tidal waves come and submerge it underwater, it's not destroyed. Anyway, cut to... I'm not sure what era it's actually supposed to take place in. Is it like the 20s or the
I thought
30s?
It was 1914.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Like actually at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. I must have missed that detail.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So right at the beginning of World War One, then.
Right just before World War One, I think.
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna try and see if I can find.
Okay. While you look at that, I'll continue with the summary. So anyway, we are in
1914. Can confirm.
Okay, 1914. So 1914, and there's a young man named Milo who's voiced by Michael J. Fox, who's working in he's giving a lecture. He basically explains the lore around Atlantis and how he's figured out that there's this journal that they've been looking for, and he's discovered that it's actually in Iceland due to a error of translation. Everyone thought it was in Ireland, but it's actually in Iceland. Then what you quickly realize is he's not actually giving a lecture. He's practicing a presentation in a boiler room at the university. I think it's actually at the university, or is it the museum where he does it?
Unclear. I thought it was at a university, but
yeah. See, I assumed the university, but throughout the movie they keep referencing the museum.
So it might be museum then.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's practicing this pitch, and then he gets a notice on one of those like chutes things. He opens up a letter, and then they say, "Oh, you've missed your meeting. We're not going to approve for your research." He quits his job. Or he threatens to quit his job, and that same evening he goes home, and there's someone in his apartment who takes him to the mansion of a Mr. Whitmore, who was friends with his grandfather, and Mr. Whitmore says, "I've got all the money, and I'm just going to go ahead and fund your expedition." And he's got everything ready for him, and then literally the next scene, they're getting on a submarine, and they're going down to, which I assume is the Atlantic Ocean. They never actually say where they're going to find Atlantis. Well, but I'm going to assume it's Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, according to just my copious background knowledge, the Atlantis was supposed to be beyond the gates of Gibraltar, which is Gibraltar is like the passage between, I believe, Africa and Spain.
That's right. That's my understanding of it too. It was around there.
So that is the Atlantic.
Yeah. In the movie, they don't say, but anyway, they're on a submarine. They're going into the ocean, and one of the things that actually I noticed about this movie is it moves really fast. Like, this is within 20 minutes. They're underwater. They're on their way to Atlantis. They encounter this giant sea creature called the Leviathan. It blows up their submarine, but they all escape on a few ships. And now they found their way to this underground passageway, this underground air pocket, which is basically the gate towards the long trek underground that will lead them to the city of Atlantis. And as they travel through this underground, like this massive underground cavern where they're finding ruins, Milo starts to meet other members of the crew who all have their own unique quirks and are all very interesting characters on their own. And then finally, they reach Atlantis. And when they get to Atlantis, they discover that Milo can speak the language because he's a linguist and he's been studying it. But the Atlanteans can also speak every other language for some reason. He explains like, oh, well, it's kind of all these other languages took their roots from this language, so maybe that's how they can understand us. Anyway, they're in Atlantis, and one of the Atlanteans who Milo befriends, who is the princess of Atlantis, and her name is Kita, and she explains that Atlantis is losing its culture and that it's a dying culture. And they've lost the ability to read. So Milo travels with her around the city of Atlantis, reading all these inscriptions and figures out more about what Atlantis is. Meanwhile, like, all of the Atlanteans have this crystal around their necklace that is actually the source of, they can use it to, it's basically like their energy source. There's then a double cross, and the team Milo brought down to Atlantis wants to take back this energy source to the surface and make lots of money. Milo, and then there's this showdown between Milo and he gets some of the crew who came with him and the Atlanteans, and they fight with the general and his
lieutenant,
and they are trying to take, small detail, Kita actually turns into this energy source.
The heart of
Atlantis, thank you. Not to be confused with the Stephen King novel or movie.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a movie with Anthony Hopkins where it's called The Heart of Atlantis, which I think is based on a Stephen King novel. Anyway, fact check that.
I'm on it.
There's a battle. Milo and his team, they rescue her, and the captain and the lieutenant are eaten up by a volcano that explodes. They get back to Atlantis, and the energy source is able to reactivate the force field that protects Atlantis from the volcano. All of the crew from Milo's expedition who helped him rescue Kida, they're given all these treasures and go back to the surface, where Milo decides to stay below. Then we see above the surface, they're back at Mr. Whitmore's mansion. They are all dressed very fancifully. It's implied that now they've got all the money in the world, and Mr. Whitmore runs through the saying like, okay, so you didn't see anything, right? Okay, so what happened here? Nothing happened. So they basically are going to sweep the whole thing.
Transmogrified.
Yeah.
Beasted. Yeah. Oh, I love Cookie.
Yeah, he's a fun kid. Yeah, those characters are a lot of fun. Anyway, so then it's implied that they just sweep the whole thing under the rug, but Milo stays in Atlantis and presumably becomes the king of Atlantis with Kida. End of movie.
Yay. So the movie you were referencing is called Hearts in Atlantis. It is based off a Stephen King novel, but get this, it was starring Anthony Hopkins. You're all right, but get this, it came out in 2001.
Oh,
like what are the odds?
That's hilarious. Okay,
Yeah.
It's Hearts in Atlantis. Okay,
Yeah. It's like that one movie and Deep Impact. There were like two movies about an asteroid that came out in the same summer.
That's hilarious. There were also two. The year the Steven Spielberg War of the Worlds adaptation came out, there was another War of the Worlds adaptation that came out that same year.
Oh, really?
That was, I also saw, and it was awful.
Well, they can't all be good.
I don't think any of them are good. I haven't seen the
I've
original.
never seen any of the Wars of the Worlds.
Okay. BBC is actually making like a War of the Worlds adaptation that takes place in the early 20th century, where it's supposed to happen. Yeah, because the thing with the Steven Spielberg one is it was contemporary, but this one's actually taking place in the like early 20th century or late 19th century, where it's actually supposed to happen in the book, and it looks so cool. Anyway.
Awesome. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah.
I'm a big
okay.
H.G. Wells fan. So let's get on with it.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts. I actually thought this movie was so tight as a comedy.
It's a funny movie.
It's
Yes.
there was points in time where I was watching this movie and like just thinking about it right now I'm laughing. There was points in time where I was watching this movie and I was just like, this movie is so funny. Like I'm laughing out loud while watching this movie, just having such a good time with it. I think its strong suits are really the ensemble cast. The actual casting itself is like super diverse. The characterization is super diverse. I love the way that the movie shows strong female characters and male characters. Like and Milo's masculinity isn't like overtly masculine, but he's still a strong male character who's like. His intelligence doesn't make him any less. Yes, he's kind of socially awkward, but his intelligence doesn't make him lesser than anyone else on the crew. So I thought that was great. However, this movie has some huge plot holes. Like, just glaring plot holes. The first one is, and this is the big one for me, if Atlantis was destroyed like 1,000 years ago, and Kida was there along with everyone else who's still alive, why can't they read?
Yeah, exactly.
Kida I get because it appears
like
like
a little
very
girl.
young. Yes.
Yeah.
But
why didn't they teach her?
Yes, the implication is that if all those people, if she was there, then other people survived.
Yeah,
and they were probably reading. So what? That one?
I guess. Yeah, I know that was
what?
Enough time passes and you just forget to read. You're like,
you just we forgot how to read.
No one's writing any new books, so we just didn't bother reading.
Yeah,
and, now we forgot how to do it.
What are you, stupid? Like, I hated that. I was sitting there like, what? But that's the big glaring one. The other problems that I had were, as I said, I love the female characterization, but I also think that there was a bit too much time on the sexualization of both Helga and Kida.
Yes,
at
I
certain
agree
points.
with that. Yeah,
I love the way they're drawn, and I'm okay with them being like strong female characters who, yes, appear to be sexy, but we also don't need to make it overt. We don't need to have like points in time where the movie goes out of its way to be like, like good looking ladies. It's like they can be good looking without being, you can draw them a certain way without being like overly sexualized in the moment. How your camera moves, the music you use, how you show them in a particular scene. You know what I mean? All of the how you show them in terms of their movement. All of these things, are not beneficial to the characterization of themselves. But like there are some scenes like where when we first see Helga, there's a scene where she is like super sexualized in a classic like, the guy walks into his apartment and like the woman's there. You know what I mean? That's like a classic spy movie.
It's like the film noir trope where
exactly. Like
it's the femme fatale character.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were going for, but I don't think it works because it's like because later on you see Helga specifically. You see her doing things, and anytime something is happening in that movie, Rourke is yelling commands, and Helga is doing them. So we can see Helga as like this super capable character, and she's drawn like she's a very beautiful woman, and she's drawn that way. But it's like you don't need to show her being overtly sexual. Same with Kida. We can tell Kida's strong. The way she like her movement. The way she like can climb things, like, you know what I mean? Her swimming. Actually, one of the things I do want to say is in one of the scenes where Kida and Milo are swimming, you can see Kida swims very gracefully, and Milo does this sort of like frog swim breaststroke. But I think it works really well because you see like their movement styles are very different. Milo knows how to swim, however, Kida is like born in a world of water. So like when she swims, like, and so that kind of body movement. Like, yes, her body is drawn to be very alluring, which is fine. Women are like that. Like women come in all different shapes and sizes, and some women look like that. That's fine. You can draw them that way. And when you show like characterization through body movement that makes sense, like, yes, she would know how to swim like that, but then not do it where she's like taking her bathing suit off and they like frame it in that way. It's like, why do you need to frame it in that way? Like, don't do that.
Yeah. And then why does that have to suddenly become a big, they turn it into this, it's one of those classic gags where it's the pretty woman taking like, getting undressed and then the guy going, getting nervous, but it's really, it doesn't do anything unnecessary.
It's not even funny, really, which is what this movie does well. This movie is incredibly funny. The other thing I will say is that I think this movie does well is I'm going to use the term steampunk, but I actually think it's diesel punk.
Okay.
And I'll split hairs, but like basically all the shit that they do with like the submarine and like the vehicles and the guns and I have a huge soft spot for that. And I'm splitting hairs here, but like I call it, steampunk, but like when I say the term diesel punk, it's because like it's not steam, it's diesel. So, and that's an actual thing. And I'm sure there are fans out there who will be like, it's not steampunk, it's diesel punk. So there you go. You can have your diesel punk. But I am a sucker for that kind of stuff, like the like greased metal, working machines. Like I love the way that looks, and I think this is great. The other plot hole that I deal with, actually, I'll save that plot hole for my pitch. But there's a second plot hole that I want to deal with, but I'll save it for my pitch.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So your thoughts, good and bad.
So my thoughts, I really liked I thought it was very imaginative, the way that they imagined this world to be, what it looked like, the design. It's a very visually stunning movie.
Absolutely.
It looks great. And I was thinking the whole time, like, I imagine what they were thinking was, let's animate this movie like it was shot as if it were a live action movie. Like it
feels like a love letter to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, so that's interesting. I actually, in some of the research I did, they were very much influenced by Jules Verne.
How could they not be?
Exactly. And they were actually pulling a lot from Journey to the Center of the Earth, which also Jules Verne and influenced the whole. Well, it's actually very much a Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Yeah.
So the visuals, I thought the visuals were stunning. I thought it looked very good. I liked some of the themes. They had themes like they talked about colonialism, capitalism, imperialism. I thought all that was very interesting in terms of like, and they do bring it up, and I do think it works in the movie mostly. I like the quirky supporting characters. My personal favorite is Vinny.
Oh, me too.
The Italian demolitions expert.
Okay. If you pay attention in the movie, there's a bunch of like small little things in there.
Okay.
Like so obviously like Vinny's points are like excellent, but then I'll use Vinny as an example, but there's a couple other ones. There's at one point in time where like Mr. Whitmore is going through each of the characters, and he's like Vincenzo, I can't remember his last name, but he's like Vinny, and then if you listen carefully, he says we had to break him out of a Turkish prison.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's just little things like that. Or then later on when Vinny's like, I'm gonna think about you 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, Saturdays we'll close early, and Sundays I'll take off. August.
Maybe I'll go in for a little bit.
August. I'm gonna take August off, and it's just like stuff like that where it's like if you're paying attention in the background or to the whole bit, it's just that much better. The other one I want to reference is when the betrayal happens. Commander Rourke says the quote, "P.T. Barnum was right."
Oh, okay.
And I looked it up because I was like, who's P.T. Barnum? P.T. Barnum was a politician who's famous for saying there's a sucker born every minute. And so I was like, I didn't get the reference, but like
I didn't get that either.
The movie's quite clever. I was like, oh, okay, so a sucker's born every minute. That's what Rourke was referring to.
Right.
Is the fact that P.T. Barnum thought, he was a showman and a not a con man, but he was, he was a politician, but he was famous for public speaking and for his ability to put on a show and maybe a bit of a sketchy salesperson.
Right.
Again, I don't want to say con man, but I'm sure that word probably got used around him. So yeah. Anyways, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that was good. No, I Vinny was my favorite. My personal favorite line from him is when he says, "Is this dynamite? Like, he's like, oh yeah, bringing dynamite, just some explosives, some cherry bombs, some paper clips, office supplies."
Paper clips.
Oh, big ones,
standard office supplies. He's the best character.
Yeah, he was funny. And I thought it was also interesting. I mentioned this in the summary, but it's a very fast paced from the start. I was actually amazed how quick they actually get to Atlantis.
Yeah.
Even though it's like 45 minutes into the movie, like it's halfway through the movie still. It's a 90-minute movie, but it moves really fast from the beginning, which I think is a strong thing for it. So now I'll get into the weaker points of the film. I
like that you use weaker points as opposed to just outright saying like you didn't like it.
Yeah, I feel like the whole I like dislike isn't. I don't think it's very helpful. In terms,
it's all perspective, but
yeah.
No, what I meant is because I really liked this movie. So when you say like weaker points, it makes me think you don't want to diminish from the fact that you did like the movie.
So I did enjoy the movie. I do think it's a good movie. I would give it a good, I don't know, out of 10 I'd give it actually I gave it a 4 out of 10 actually, but I do think it's better than that. Yeah. I think the story is actually really it really suffers actually.
Oh, I would agree with that. That's why partially why I'm excited to hear the pitches.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think there's a lot of cool things about it. But anyway, I'll get into that now. The weaker points, the story. I felt that some of the characters were too caricatured. Like they were too, and I don't mean the supporting characters. Like I think it works to have supporting characters who are like very
a little
quirky.
two-dimensional.
Yeah. But I mean specifically Milo, Kita, General Rourke, and Mr. Whitmore. Actually, I thought they were all a little too narrowly defined, I would say.
Okay.
I felt there was a little bit too much. You talked about this a little bit. For me, with the Atlantean Empire, I thought that it was a little exoticized, a little bit.
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that, but like the sort of othering that we do.
Yeah. One of the things that I was curious about, because it seemed to have a lot more of and in the language and in the look of it had, excuse me, what I felt like was more of a Central American influence to it. Okay. Which I thought was interesting because I always thought of it being more closer to the Mediterranean, so I thought it would have been more,
I think
more
it's like supposed to be
Greek
Mediterranean.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm just gonna have some water here.
Yeah, I always imagined that it would be closer to the sort of Mediterranean, I don't know, because I thought about this as well, but I hadn't thought about it in so much as this like othering, but just because it's relevant, like Black Panther has been out for almost a year now, and to me, I kind of thought like that Atlantis was sort of this like Afrofuturism kind of movement, in terms of like clearly they're not Caucasian. And
Right.
yet they used to have this like amazing technology and power that is separate from, Western ideals. And so I kind of thought about it more as like this Afro-punk, Afrofuturism movement. But then that kind of gets squandered because then Milo comes in and he's the white savior.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is a shortcoming of the movie. Now, one of the things I did in my little research, there are actually theories. The whole it being more based on like having more of like a Central American look to it. That actually, one of the theories is that actually was like a very Mayan in its design and its look and culture. That's one of the theories if it were to exist. So I think that's fitting, but I do feel that was exoticized a little bit. And the whole idea of, Milo becomes the white guy who has all the answers and can save them, I thought was a little, it didn't help the movie, let's say.
No.
And the other thing I felt in terms of where it suffers on just a purely plot story point of view, I felt at the beginning Milo gets what he wants way too easily. Now, at the same time, I mean, they have to get to Atlantis somehow, but I felt that I addressed it a little bit in my pitch, but I felt that it was way too easy for Milo to get to where they needed to go. And then even on the way to Atlantis, he doesn't do... Like, he does navigate them, but I felt he was very inactive for most of the movie up until they get to Atlantis. The other thing I thought was a shortcoming was I actually felt it was stronger to not show the collapse of Atlantis at the beginning, and then have them discover Atlantis, and to discover Atlantis through the eyes of the main character, I thought would just be more interesting. I thought the falling in love with Kita happened way too fast.
Yeah, I also addressed that in my pitch.
I'm also not a fan of this. Oh, the princess is trapped, and now the main character dude has to go rescue her.
I solved that in my pitch as well.
Yeah, I solved that too. Milo's character I felt was a little flat. The other thing I thought was weird was maybe they talk about this, but the journal at the beginning, he goes to meet Mr. Whitmore, and Whitmore says, "Oh, here's the journal, or my grandfather wanted to give this to you when you were ready." But my thing is, if they discovered this journal, and this journal points to clues of Atlantis, why did they keep it a secret from everyone? Like, I don't get that.
That you're hinting at one of the second plot hole that I'm going to reference in my pitch.
Oh, okay. I thought, like, if his grandfather was trying to prove the existence of Atlantis, and
why
found
wouldn't
this
he be
journal,
like, "Hey, you people, like, hey,
Exactly.
everyone." Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's this whole like, oh, we are going to keep it secret from my grandson until he's old enough to...
So, in terms of your thoughts about structure where Milo gets what he wants too early, I'm going to relate this curiously enough to musical structure.
Okay.
Not compositional structure, sorry. I mean like musical theater structure. So usually the second or third song in any musical is referred to as the I Want song.
Okay, yeah.
And so the I Want song is literally just like,
it's like, I want much more than this provincial life.
Exactly. Like I was literally just going to reference, like Belle says, I want adventure in the great white somewhere. I want it more than I can tell. Right. That's the reprise from this provincial life. And that's literally just the I Want song. But you see it time and time again. And especially, I mean, I can list them off, but like you see them in almost every musical. I'll just reference a few in case people are curious, but like in Wicked, you have The Wizard and I. In Hamilton, you have what's the song called? I'm not going to. I have it right here. Hold on. Sorry.
Okay. I'm just trying to go through the Hamilton songs that I've heard, and
My Shot.
Okay.
Is the name of the song. Yeah. So anyway, so my point is that this narrative structure is because if Milo was to sing, if we could get Michael J. Fox to sing, what would he be singing about? Is it that he wants the journal? Is it that he wants to go to Atlantis? Like, what actually is Milo's motivation in this, other than proving his grandfather right? But then he, like, as soon as he gets the journal, which happens, 10 minutes in?
Yeah, exactly.
He winds up, I honestly think, and I'm going to say it, and I can see people's eyes rolling, I honestly think this would have been an amazing animated TV show.
Yeah.
With the first
they
season.
tried that, but
yeah, but they tried it as a sequel. But imagine the first season of an animated TV show, say 12 half-hour episodes, or actually 12 half-hour episodes would work because then you'd have way more than 90 minutes. And you say it moves really fast-paced, but if you keep that fast pacing but move it over, 12, 30-minute episodes of an animated TV show, then you have your first episode could be Milo dealing with not going to Atlantis, and at the end someone's in his apartment. End that episode.
Right.
The second episode, would be him meeting Mr. Whitmore, and then we introduce the crew. The third episode is, them on a boat, still getting to know the crew, because I think it's important to spend the time with an ensemble cast. You know what I mean? And so you move through it that way. So by the time we hit episode 10, right? They're in Atlantis. So we get episode 10, 11, 12. They're actually in Atlantis, and we meet Kita. And then episode 12, you have the
reversal.
Betrayal.
Yeah.
You have the betrayal, and then you leave it on a cliffhanger.
And then you go, ooh, we need to get renewed for season 2.
Exactly. But I think because you mentioned how quick it moves, but the whole montage section in the middle of the movie where once they've past the Leviathan, which I think that scene went by far too quickly. The Leviathan was way too cool of a creature to just sort of pose off in 3 minutes.
Right, yeah.
Because when Milo goes it's a machine, I was like, that's the coolest revelation.
Yeah,
and they don't even talk about it.
I know. There's nothing beyond it. They don't talk about that further. So, and I think that length, the fact that they have to stay confined to a 90-minute length is part of what, and actually the little research I did suggested that originally they had more time. The original draft, I think, was 150 pages, and they're like, it's a Disney movie. We have to get this down to 90 pages.
Minutes. Oh, see, that sucks. But I understand, early 2000s Disney was kind of an, animated features were 90 minutes. But this really would have benefited from.
Sorry, my headphones became disconnected for a second there.
That this really would have been benefited from being longer, but and then you have that cliffhanger. But sorry, I wanted to say the whole montage segment where we see Milo dealing with each of the problems in the book. Mm-hmm. The bridge that Vinny makes, which is hilarious. We see the skull thing. We see different problems that Milo's solving with the help of each crew member. Those could have easily been done over the course of 1 or 2 episodes, because then we see them solving problems together, but we also see the pace by which things are happening is much too quick in the movie. I agree. Say it works for the movie, and yes, it does. It keeps the comedic timing really, really good, but it also means we don't get a lot of time for one of the things that you said was a detriment, which was we don't get a lot of time for the characters becoming 3-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, this movie, I'll go into this in my pitch, but for me, this movie shines the most when it is an ensemble cast. All the sort of supporting characters, we're still focused on Milo, but that's where this movie really shines.
I would agree. I felt the supporting characters were much more interesting, and
Absolutely.
They were also just a much more diverse set of characters too. And I thought that was really cool. I was watching it and went, wow, they're actually this is... there's some really interesting ideas, with the doctor and with Vinny and with the mechanic. What was her name again? Audrey, yes. Some really cool ideas for the characters. And it's a catch-22 because it's I can see that when they were my guess is they're structuring it. They're it's a Disney animated movie. We've only got 90 minutes. What do we lose? Well, I guess the story is us in Atlantis, so let's lose the getting to Atlantis. But yes, then you do lose the time to actually get to know the characters more.
TV show, animated series.
I would
watch
think that'd be
the
cool.
shit out of that.
I would too. Also, because then you can get into the backstory of each of the characters too.
Exactly.
And they each have interesting stories to tell. And then when the doctor says, "Oh, you don't want to know about Mole's story," then you could have a little bit where it actually gets into his story.
The cool thing about, because I'm actually fairly certain the reason we don't get Moliere's story, it's a funny bit. I do enjoy that bit, but I'm pretty sure the reason we don't get it is just because they were like, we don't have time.
Yeah, exactly.
We just don't have time for it. And Moliere and Vinny are two amazing characters. But even Doc Sweet's like, Doc Sweet is like this super kind, caring person, but it's like each of them has such a Miss Packard is hilarious. Cookie is not nearly in the film enough. There's points in time in the movie where I forget he's a thing.
Yeah, he kind of just he disappears for a bit and then he comes back. But yeah, his moments, he has some moments where he shines and it's really funny. Yeah. And I agree. I think it's the supporting characters really make the movie. And that's, I think, what they tried to do with the TV series. I don't remember much of the TV series.
The TV series, I'm pretty sure, was only like 3 episodes.
Yeah, it didn't run for very long.
No, it was only like 3 episodes, and because they were trying to use the movie as like a launch point. And really, I think they should have done it the other way around. Like, if they kept the budget and set the first movie as like the first season.
Well, I think, I don't know I feel like there was a period where Disney just, they'd make movies, they'd make a movie, and then they'd go, oh, well, let's make a TV series of it. Like,
they did that with Aladdin.
There was a Lilo and Stitch TV series.
They did that with Hercules. Yeah.
Right. And then after, there were like Aladdin sequels.
Yeah.
I think there was all of them had an unnecessary sequel. Like Bambi had an unnecessary sequel.
Bambi has a sequel?
Bambi has a sequel.
What is it, like Return of the Hunter? Like, how do you have Bambi's like, for what it is, Bambi is great, but like Bambi's not exactly like a robust plot anyway.
No, it's like times. His mom dies, and that's the movie.
Yeah. Some hunter comes along and does what hunters do. And anyway, that was... So one of the other things about this movie is also super dark. And by that, in
terms of tone, or...
No, not tone. The tone's quite light. I mean, like, when the ship is going down, Audrey's like closing a hatch, and there's still a dude on the other side.
Oh yeah,
and she just closes hatch, and I'm like, this is some Pearl Harbor shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy crap! Like, and same with when Atlantis is crumbling. Like, the shields go up, and people are on the other side, and I get it, but like for a Disney movie, that's some dark imagery.
It's true, actually. Yeah, I thought about that too. And actually, one of the reviews was apparently like one of the things that people applauded it for was they're like, wow, Disney's sort of inching into the like adult. You know, they're dealing with some more mature themes, and I suspect that's part of what that was. And then also with colonialism and that being a big part of the movie too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I wanted to add this. The other thing that I thought was a weak point was the fact that the Atlanteans can speak every language.
Yeah, that's dumb.
I thought that was dumb. There were a few points in the movie where I was like, what, that's stupid.
I think I've said this before. I think I've said this before on CineMasters, but I'll say it again. One of my biggest pet peeves is if you're going to have people speak another language. Oh, I said it on Bright. I definitely said it on Bright. If you're going to have people speak another language, just commit. Use subtitles.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right? So have Milo be able to speak it. Just commit. Use subtitles. I'm okay with it.
I agree.
Do it for the sake of the movie.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. I think it's and I think it's also because I wonder how much of it was they're like, oh, it's Disney and there's going to be kids and we can't subject them to having to read subtitles.
Yeah, children can't read. They're like Atlanteans.
I mean, kids wouldn't. Yeah.
Yup.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
That's good, yeah. Should we do pitches now?
Yeah, I think we should do pitches.
Do you want to do your pitch first? Or?
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay. So as I said, this is a stellar comedy with a decent story, but with some plot holes. So I try to adjust those plot holes. So I came at this, I didn't even think about colonialism or sort of white saviorism. So my pitch still deals with those things because, unfortunately, those are part of the film we got. But the theme that I tried to go around was progress in ethics. Progress in terms of science and technology in relation to ethics. And so the parallel I drew is between Mr. Whitmore and his like money and technology that he has to fund this trip to Atlantis, compared to the Atlantean or technology that they had at their prime, and to see where it's gotten them. So keep that in mind as we go through. Mine still has problems of white saviorism, in terms of, colonial, neoliberal colonialism and shit like that. But I try to deal with a few more things in a better way. So bear with me on that one. So the prologue opens with a view of what the Atlanteans have managed to create in terms of their city, the greatness, the flying machines. So it's still that prologue, but we don't get Kida or the king or the queen, none of that. It's just, I want to do like this, like big sweeping shots of like showing flying machines and the fact that they have like crystal energy of some kind or whatever, like just showing that, like, look at what they've managed to create with their time. And then we see a flood occurs and it wipes out and drowns Atlantis as it like sinks into the ocean, and we focus on the destruction that the flood is causing. So we see like the flying machines get knocked over, we see people dying, just as we kind of do in the film. But and we see Atlantis sort of sink into the water, but it's not protected by anything, and we never see Kida or the king or the mom. That's not part of it. Just the sort of actual flooding is what we see. So then, thousands of years later, it's 1914. We're introduced to Milo. That all works really well. I actually think that boiler scene where he looks like he's lecturing and then he flips on the lights. Oh, comedic gold. That's such a great scene. So that all works the same way, and he can try or quits his job and stuff like that. So then when he goes into his room, we're still introduced to Helga, but she's not sexualized by her clothing or the music or the camera, but the scene plays out the same. She's just not sexualized, because why? So then we go to see Mr. Whitmore, and this all plays out the same, except there's an emphasis on we hear Milo's already heard about Mr. Whitmore's company, but not necessarily doesn't know Mr. Whitmore or that his grandfather was friends with Mr. Whitmore. He just or even actually, I would prefer it if his grandfather and Mr. Whitmore didn't know each other. Mr. Whitmore is just he runs he has a famous company, and Milo's introduced to him. So when he goes inside, we see all the sort of things Mr. Whitmore and his company have invented. There's like engines and a whole bunch of crazy, steampunk or diesel punk inventions that Mr. Whitmore has, and he's going to use those to fund, that's how he's made his money, and he's going to use those to fund the project. So then we get introduced to all the characters as well. And that still works out all the same way. Then they're on the boat. As they're loading the boat, we see sort of Milo seeing all these stuff getting loaded on, and we can introduce all the characters here because that works really, really well. But I want there to be an emphasis, like Milo's like, wow, we sure are taking a lot of stuff and a lot of people. Like do we need all this stuff for just an exploration? And we can introduce Rourke, and Rourke can be like, oh, you leave that to us and don't worry about it. We'll focus. You focus on cartography and translating the Shepherd's journal, and we'll focus on the rest. And I also, Mr. Whitmore explains that they found the Shepherd's Journal, although they found it with the help of Milo's grandfather. But the research Milo's grandfather did, not Milo's grandfather himself. It was based on Milo's grandfather's research. They found the journal, and that's why they asked Milo. But Mr. Whitmore didn't know Milo's grandfather personally. Just because I think that...
I like that, actually. Yeah, that's good.
It's based on Milo's research, and now they're asking, we used his research, and you were using his research, so we want you to be part of this expedition. But we found the journal, and it was in Iceland. You were correct. We found the journal, but we haven't told anyone about it. And I'll explain. That will come as we go.
Okay, cool. I'm liking it so far, yeah.
Yeah. So all the gags during Then the Leviathan is still a machine, but I want more emphasis on like how it was built. Like, so they, instead of just like outrunning it, they actually like fight it off. With here, I think it would be cool if Milo uses some kind of, or even Audrey, because she's the engineer, uses some kind of knowledge of how machines are put together. And then we can show off more like steampunk awesomeness of the submarine and different things that it can do, because I love steampunk. But like, yeah, literally, or diesel punk, yeah. But I really want to be like, if it's a machine, then how would you deal with it as opposed to a regular fish instead of outrun it? Because I think it's too cool of a creature to just sort of, we outran it and then it never comes back.
Right.
Yeah. So something along the lines of actually solving that problem as opposed to outrunning it. So then we have like them actually getting to Atlantis once they're in the air pocket. So all the gags during the clip montage, those are all fine because they're hilarious. But I also don't like the ostracization of Milo. I think it would be funnier if it was a bit more like he's the new kid. They all know each other, but except for Audrey. So they sort of like haze him, but it's all in good fun. It's not like he's being ostracized. It's like, you know, the pranks are being done, but then Milo, we also see Milo pulling pranks on some of the others as well.
Yeah,
like he's part of the
agree
crew.
With that.
It's more of a bonding experience where like, yeah, they make fun of Milo. So maybe like the first gag is the nitroglycerin thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then like the next gag is like, you know, them all making fun of Cookie's cooking, and then, you know, the next one is them making fun of Moliere, but altogether it's a bonding experience. It's not an ostracization of
and it makes
Milo
more sense too. It's a much more natural progression for their yeah, I agree. That was something I like that you addressed that, because that was a problem I had with the movie too.
Yeah, because I also think like Audrey is a new character, or not a new character. Audrey is new to the crew as well. She was not on the Iceland expedition, as we're explicitly told in the movie, and yet nobody's mean to her. So it's like,
that's true.
Why are we being mean to Milo? Is it because he's the nerdy, awkward, like socially awkward kid? Because that's not cool.
Because he can't drive manual.
Yeah, that's still a great gag. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
We don't need to be like explicitly mean to Milo. So
yeah, exactly.
Cool. So. The only people who are not interested in like getting to know Milo on a personal level are Rourke and Helga, but it's in a soldier way, not in a mean way. Like they're like, we came here to do a job, you know, but we also see them not really being friendly with the rest of the crew either. They're there for a trip. The rest of the crew is there, you know, they're like, yeah, we're on the trip, but we're also like, you know, we're not soldiers. So we see like Doc, Cookie, Packard, like all those people are you know, they're friendly.
Yeah. Did you just drink that? Yes. Well, that was nitroglycerin. You just don't do anything. Just except maybe
don't move. Don't even breathe.
Just maybe pray.
So during this part, I want to emphasize still again the cool steampunky things. So as we solve each of these problems that Milo does, we solve them with both feats of intellect and feats of engineering from all of the Whitmore tech. At one point, Milo wonders why they're taking so many crates. Rather than just food after they crash. But then Helga sort of distracts him and reaverts his attention by asking about the journal that he's like read through a couple times. So there's still a page missing, just as there was in the original movie. There's still a page missing from the shepherd's journal. And then Audrey asks, how come the shepherd knew how to get to Atlantis if Atlantis was lost? How is the shepherd able to know all these things if nobody's ever found Atlantis before? And Milo's like, yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. Like, how does that happen? This is the second plot point. Second plot hole. So Milo's like, yeah, I don't know, but like, so far it's been right. I mean, maybe it's just a really good guess, but so far it's all been right. And so the missing page, Milo finds the missing page, and he talks about how like there's a missing page here, and it seems to talk about this heart of Atlantis, but there's a page missing. It just gets cut off. But Milo is convinced that it's some kind of power source or a battery, an energy source, something that could be used in that way. He's convinced that's what it is, but without the missing page, they'll never know. So once we're actually in Atlantis, we meet the Atlanteans, we meet Kida and her father, but they're not thousands of years old because that's stupid. They're not thousands of years. They're regular people. They live regular lives. That's not a thing. So the same sort of dismissal of the crew happens where the king can sort of be like, no, I don't want you here. leave, don't be here. And Rourke can be like, through Milo, because obviously they don't speak the language, Rourke can still push like one night and then we'll go. And the king says, yes, fine. So just like the original movie. So then Rourke suggests that they spend a day learning about Atlantis, and because Milo can speak the language, he winds up like helping them all. So he winds up with Kita. But I want to stress that the whole cast is around because like all the supporting characters are there, and we can have more gags because this movie works as an ensemble comedy more than it does an exploration story. So like this cast is still around, but because they don't speak the language, we can have a few gags that way. We can have Moliere being, Moliere. We can have Vinny being Vinny. We can show Doc's like kind side and how he uses, what he knows to sort of help the people. But we also see like the Atlanteans have managed to survive, but their civilization has definitely depleted. Like it's not nearly as like flying cars and stuff like that because they don't know how to read anymore, because none of them, like during the collapse, they lost all their culture, and because none of them were alive, we don't have that huge plot hole.
Right.
So we see all of this happen because of the collapse of their civilization. So and instead of just having Kita and Milo sort of just exposition the movie, we sort of we learn about it through the entire ensemble cast. So then Kita finds out that Milo can read, and he sort of becomes an invaluable resource. So Kita tells her father about Milo's ability, but he still she's like, he can teach us how to read again because he studied this, and our scholars, including her, have studied it, but he's a lot farther. He could help them with his knowledge of other languages because we only have one language, Atlantean. So we can't translate what we don't know. But because Milo has studied other languages, he can help us. He can show us how to recover our written language. But Kita has been trying to teach herself and through other scholars, but Milo has because of the other languages. Anyway.
Yeah.
But Kita's father still, they says he must leave. They have to leave, but he doesn't give a reason. And Kita thinks that's bullshit because she's like, well, he can read this stuff. He can help us. But the king's like, no, they have to leave. So Kita gets upset. She leaves. And then the others say, Milo, why don't you go after her? Like figure out, she seems really upset. So then Kita is in a library that's filled with books that she cannot read, but she's looking at the pictures. Here, Milo and Kita can have a moment because they don't really get one in the movie. But here we can sort of show some actual emotional growth, where Milo being like, I can read, but I can't, I can't stay. But then Kita also being upset and being like, look at all this culture that nobody, we can't read, we've lost everything to us. And they can have sort of a heart to heart there where we actually see some growth together between the two of them. So then Milo reads one of the books on Atlantean tech, and he learns that the Atlanteans were a great civilization that had created many machines and weapons, such as the autonomous Leviathan, which was created by them. But none was greater than the heart of Atlantis, which it turns out is a weapon, not a machine. So when they return, Rourke has taken everyone hostage with weapons that Milo did not see, but now we know what was in the crates that they kept taking.
Okay, right.
They're like fancy steampunk weapons, clearly made by the Whitmore Company. So Milo says that Mr. Whitmore would never have allowed, Rourke to do these kinds of things. And Rourke says that, no, Mr. Whitmore was the one who invented the guns we're holding. And it's his fortune that Mr. Whitmore gained his fortune by using science and discovery to create weapons. That's how Mr. Whitmore's fortune. So they basically got to Atlantis on blood money.
Right.
And so here Rourke produces the torn page and says it was actually given to him by Mr. Whitmore. It was taken out of the journal by Mr. Whitmore and given to Rourke. And it explains that Mr. Whitmore knew that the heart was a weapon, and he wanted it for himself so he could make more money. So everyone on the crew actually knew except for Milo.
Okay. I like that. Yeah.
So then Kita's father explains that he turned them away because he knew what they were after. He knew they would come for the heart of Atlantis. And they were actually not the first visitors to come to Atlantis looking for the weapon. A man named Captain Shepard came with his crew, the Shepard's Journal, came with his crew hundreds of years before, but when they learned the truth that the heart of Atlantis was a weapon, they were turned away and they left. and that's why we see ships underground from every era. One of those ships was Captain Shepard's.
Okay.
Yeah. So the same thing plays out with the heart of Atlantis will be found through the eyes of the king. So they go underneath the king's chamber the same way we did, but instead of having this floating energy source, it's some kind of old school Atlantean machine with the same kind of smooth aesthetic as the flying machines. Like I really like the Atlantean aesthetic, which is very different from the pipes and smoke and steam and diesel from Whitmore.
It's very elegant.
I like that kind of dichotomy, and I want to keep it. So we see, but it's clearly still some kind of Atlantean machine. So Rourke wants to make sure he knows how the weapon works and that it's legitimate. So he forces one of the Atlanteans into what looks like a cockpit and then has Milo read out the instructions. So the space that looks like a cockpit turns out to actually be a battery slot, and the machine runs on human life. That's why it's called like the heart of Atlantis.
Okay.
So the woman or whatever, the Atlantean who's in the battery slot, does the whole thing where she turns. You know how Rourke at the end of the movie turns into like that blue thing? Yeah. Same kind of visual thing. She turns blue and then sort of like just fades away. And then the machine powers up, and it causes a huge earthquake. So it turns out, as Milo's reading, it turns out that the machine is powered by human life, and it causes natural disasters. And so that's what the heart of Atlantis is. So Rourke then packs the machine up and leaves Milo and the others for dead. So then the king, who's been tortured just like we saw in the movie, got his ass kicked and is super old. So the king explains that the amazing technology that the Atlanteans had also meant that they found a way to use the life force of a human, and they turned that into a weapon. Because of progress, the same kind of hubris that the Whitmore
that's
company
cool.
uses.
That's a cool parallel. Yeah.
So, but then because they grew so powerful, somebody used the weapon on Atlantis itself and caused the flood. And so that's why the kings of Atlantis after the flood have kept the weapon locked away. Basically that's what caused it. So the king then tells Milo before he dies, he says, and to Kida, because Kida's there as well, because she's not the heart. So he tells the two of them, he's like, it's not like progress is great, but to be a good person, like Milo is a good person because not only does he want knowledge, not only does he crave discovery, but he knows that there are wrong ways and right ways to use that knowledge and that discovery. And then he dies. So Milo and Kida then decide, like they get together with their whole crew and they say, we can't let Rourke leave with the weapon. So the same beats can play out, except Kida is an active member and not in a box because I don't like that. And also she's not the heart. So she actually like leads the, I would love a scene where like Milo is like, we got to do something. And the crew's like, yeah, okay, we're with you. But the Atlanteans are like, what? Right? And then Kida is sort of like, that machine out there was built by our ancestors. It's our responsibility. We have to take it back. Where like she shows some agency in trying to say like it's our responsibility, even though our ancestors made it. And so she sort of gets the Atlanteans on board, and then they go after it. So they go after the machine.
Much better. Yeah.
So the same beats play out. Then Helga sets off she falls. Helga falls off the thing after Rourke like tries to shoot her. I don't know. Yeah. So she falls to the bottom of the volcano, which is a long ass fall, and I'm not sure how she survived.
I'm not sure how she survived that either.
She managed to survive, but like we clearly see that her she's not doing well. And then she sets off the explosion that makes the blimp crash to the ground. But Milo, or in this case, actually, I think either Milo or Kida, I think it would be better if it was Kida, actually saves her at the last minute, so she's still alive.
Okay.
Because Kida shows that she is a good person. So the volcano explodes, and it looks as though Atlantis will be destroyed by the explosion. But Milo, thinking quickly, comes up with a plan. He thinks if the weapon can be created, the weapon can be used to cause a natural disaster, it might also be used to stop one. And so he and Audrey, try to work through how the mechanics of this machine work, because she's an engineer and Milo has the knowledge. So they try to work through how the actual inner workings work with the help of the Atlanteans. But the only problem is in order to get the machine to work, somebody has to give up their life. So Helga, who's basically fell, and she's like, I'm not going to survive. And Rourke betrayed me, and you've shown me like you guys are good people. So she's like, put me into the machine, put me into the heart of Atlantis, and stop the volcano. So then they put her in, and they wind up stopping the volcano, and you can have this huge, awesome thing. And I think that would be such a cool shot. And then the epilogue would be the crew are back on the surface. We get shown this time, instead of Mr. Whitmore giving the explanation, it's Doc Sweet basically saying like, let's go through this one more time. And they talk, and it's also revealed that Mr. Whitmore went bankrupt after he funded the expedition, because the crew didn't give him anything and they didn't tell him anything afterwards. So the Mr. Whitmore is now bankrupt. His company is out of business, and they're all rich. And Doc Sweet leads the epilogue, and Milo and Kita are shown to be together, but not necessarily romantically, because that's a little quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
I have one question about your pitch.
Absolutely.
How did the king know that it was a weapon?
I would assume that he had been told, like every king had been told.
Okay.
Like passed it down, like you must not let anyone get hold of the heart of Atlantis, because it was our, so every king. So we could also explain, like, how he like passes off the crystal and is basically like, it's your time. Instead of passing the crystal to Milo, he passes the crystal to Kita and says,
which makes a lot more sense.
And she's there. So he passes the crystal to Kita and says, you are now the ruler of Atlantis.
Right.
You must know the truth. Our ancestors, like every ruler of Atlantis, has known, or since the collapse, has known that Atlantis is the heart of Atlantis is a weapon. And I couldn't tell you until you were the ruler, but now you are the ruler.
Right.
And then he can die.
Because I'm suffering from internal bleeding.
Yes. What do you mean internal bleeding? That's where the blood is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea here was, I really like that. It's a good question, because it clarifies, like, Kita is now the ruler, as she's supposed to be, and she knows the knowledge that the heart is a weapon.
Right.
So only the kings know that. But the idea behind mine was essentially, again, just to reiterate, the progress between the parallel between the Whitmore industry. It's also pre-World War I, so I want to emphasize, like the king is literally saying, if you stay on this track, all this science and technology is only going to lead to destruction. Basically, like preemanating or like, alluding to World War I. Just the same way that, we created this awesome, fantastic power source that runs on human life. And what did we do with it? First of all, you sacrifice a human life to create a natural disaster. And in the end, it was this that caused Atlantis to die and shrink. And that's why I didn't really want people like Milo to be here, so that we could get our culture back and destroy more of the earth, or destroy more land, or destroy other cultures. But when he sees that like Milo is a good person, he's like, yes, okay, like,
right.
Yeah.
Instead of in the movie where it's like, oh well, there's
I guess
no
you're
one else
king now
in the room, and
except there definitely is other people in the room, and I think Doc Sweet is in the room, and I really like Doc Sweet as a character, and I think he would have made a way better king than Milo.
Yeah, no kidding. But
that's my pitch. So now I want to hear yours.
I love it. Okay, so as I said in the things I didn't like with the film, I would start not with the prequel showing Atlantis. I would actually start with his grandfather in Iceland finding the journal.
Oh.
It would be him and Whitmore actually in Iceland finding the journal, and someone's like, I have a thing here where I've written they talk a bit about the ethics of grave robbing, and Milo's grandfather says like, no, this is for knowledge, like this is really important that we find this, but now we found this journal and this will help us find Atlantis. But it'd be kind of a quick thing at the opening. Then it would go to Milo. He's actually a professor at a university in linguistics, and is actually an expert in his field and is doing his own research.
But not cartography.
But not cartography.
Okay.
No. Anyway, he gets word that his grandfather is dying, and he goes to visit his grandfather. And his grandfather, on his deathbed, is asked, like, Milo, can you please continue my research for me? And then he explains, like, I found this journal, and I want you to continue. Now, up to this point, Milo has always been fascinated by Atlantis. He loves the stories of Atlantis, but he doesn't think it exists. But when his grandfather...
But are these like stories that his grandfather would have told him, but he never thought it existed?
Exactly. So he's heard everything from his grandfather, but just never was like, okay, like, go do your thing. I don't think you'll find it, but that's really cool what you're doing. But then his grandfather says, I promise me that you will continue where I left off. And Milo, his grandfather's dying, says, yeah, sure. I promise. But then it's ambiguous as to whether he's actually going to follow through with that. Anyway, later he reads the journal and he's going through it and he's translating it and he's figuring out how it's constructed. And this is like it's suggested that a lot of time has passed for him to be able to do this. And he starts cross-referencing the things in this book to things that he knows and finds that actually Atlantis might actually be real, and he may have actually found out exactly where it is.
Nice.
So maybe his grandfather was right all along. So then he takes us to someone at the university. In this case, it's a university. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Agreed.
And he says, look, I know that you all thought my grandfather was crazy, but I found this. I've done the reading on this journal that he found, and I actually think I've pinpointed the exact location to where Atlantis is. And someone at the university says, you're really well-intentioned. We think it's really cool that you've done this. Oh, and my version takes place in the 30s during the Great Depression.
Oh, okay.
And they say, you know what, we would. Why don't you focus on your own research? Like, why are you doing this? We know you made a promise with your grandfather, but let's be real. Like, no one wants to fund any big expeditions right now. It's just simply not going to happen. And Milo mentions, well, there may be a practical reason for this. There's something in the journal that suggests that this place had an energy source of some kind. So
I like where this is going.
Maybe we could, like, we'll go on this expedition awesome. And maybe we'll find something that will help us with, finding energy. Maybe this will actually help us solve some of our problems.
Yeah.
The university says, you know what, it's really cool, but we just can't fund it right now. But someone else at the university approaches him and says, you know what, I know someone you might want to talk to about this. And he takes him to Mr. Whitmore. And Milo meets him and explains, like, I was this person's grandson. And Mr. Whitmore says, oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I helped him find that journal. That thing you're holding. I'm actually really excited to meet you. I thought your grandfather was crazy. I was helping him because we were friends and I had money and I wanted to help him with his expedition. And then Milo has the journal and explains to him everything. And Mr. Whitmore's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And then when Milo says, but there's this energy source, and Mr. Whitmore says, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about this energy source. So Milo pitches him on the idea with the expedition, all the details about it, and Mr. Whitmore by the end goes, you know what? Let's actually, I will fund this. I will give you the money, and I'll go with you, actually. And we'll go and let's find this. And, if you're right, this might be a discovery that will be beneficial for all of mankind. Anyway, he's getting ready. And then there'd be a long process, like it'd be a montage of them actually getting ready, of them actually preparing. I have a little idea for a scene where someone asks him about why he's doing what he's doing. Like, why is this so important for you? You do have your own research. Like, why is this so now
doing
suddenly
it for the
so
babes.
important? Yeah, exactly. And Milo says, well, knowledge is knowledge, and knowledge, no matter what, like, whatever knowledge we find, it's always going to help us. And then someone says, but so we find this lost civilization, like, what does it matter? Like, let's suppose we go down there and it's just a bunch of ruins. Like, what's the point? That doesn't help us. So anyway, so they get ready to go. There's this long process of them actually getting prepared. And then they're ready to go. And from this point, it follows more or less the same trajectory, but this time Whitmore actually goes with them specifically.
Yeah, I always wondered why he didn't go with them in the original.
Yeah, and I felt it was one of the shortcomings where he's kind of the like almost this fairy godmother character who like waves his wand and like poof, everything happens, and then at the end of the movie, oh poof, everything, we fixed all the problems. He's like too benevolent a character.
Yeah, well, that's also like the reason I didn't want to bring him with him on my pitch is because I was like, I wanted him to sort of be this like, at first you think he's benevolent, but then the reason he doesn't come is because he's so rich he doesn't have to.
Yeah, exactly, and it could work that way too. And actually, I actually might borrow some of your ideas and put them in here because I liked where you went with some of those things.
Keep going.
And mine also as well. The crew is a little more friendly with Milo. There's a bit of a camaraderie that is formed between them, but there's also a bit of a distance because he's this intellectual who's there, and they see him. This is also during the Depression, and they're from families that are struggling.
Yeah,
and he's
you
someone
can show that through background.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I had this idea, a scene where he walks to the university, and he's walking through a poverty-stricken part of wherever he
well
lives.
Done.
And he's aware, so he's aware of the difference in class, and so that also is reflected in the crew. Now he treats the crew with respect and dignity, and they notice that, and they're able to have a friendship. But there's still this class distinction that exists on board with the crew. Anyway, they're on the submarine together. So one of the things I would like to spend more time on, and I think you're right in suggesting it should be a TV series, because I'd like to focus on like what would be the dynamics of being this crew on this submarine, and you actually would have a hierarchy. Yeah. And Milo is somewhere in the middle because he's not paying for everything, but he is also kind of the brains behind the expedition.
Well, I mean, he's at least some kind of like direction tool, but like clearly there's some soldiers like Rourke and Helga are both like some kind of military. So I mean, clearly Rourke's in charge and Helga's next in charge. But yeah, where does Milo fall in terms of his and the structure? Yeah,
yeah, and then also with the other crew, like they're basically hired hands to work this ship, and they'd be working long hours, and they even make reference to it in the movie too, like, hey, we're not getting paid overtime for this. They kind of throw it away as a joke, but it's also there's a reference, like you think about it, you go, oh, they're like, yeah, they're here for money. How would that work? What would that system be like? There's a lot to explore there, I think.
I like that it's set in the 30s. This is getting good.
Anyway, so same thing, they find the Leviathan. I'm going to steal your idea where they actually solve the problem, and they actually think about it a little bit more afterwards, like, that's interesting. That was actually a machine. Oh, now we're actually, we've already made some interesting discoveries on this voyage. But in my version, in the process, a lot of people die still.
Yeah.
And then they're in this underground cavern, and they're making their way towards Atlantis. And on the way, someone says, they start to question, like people in the crew who he's befriended say, why are we continuing with this? Like, think about all those people who died. Is that really worth it for this, for this expedition?
And they've already discovered so much.
Exactly. And there'd be more talk about, like, maybe we don't need, like, maybe we could go back. Like, we already know that there's something here. And maybe we should just, why do we need to keep going? And Milo and Whitmore are the ones who are like, no, we should keep going. But Milo thinks about it a little bit more and goes, yeah, but there are all these people who are coming along for it, and people have suffered this far, but they decide to keep going all the same. But the tension in mine is not that, he's weird and awkward and they don't like him. It's that he's essentially pushing that they go forward, and as much as they like him, they don't want to die, and they're aware of the danger of what they're doing now. So that is where the tension comes in my version. And so eventually they find Atlantis, and instead of it being like, held up with spears and being dragged into the city, they're actually escorted to the city as welcome guests. And what they find is first of all, they're surprised that there's people there, but they actually find a thriving civilization instead. So that was how I got around the whole thing of them not being able to read, was they actually can read, and they've been they've actually been a very active and very prolific civilization, creating lots of art.
Minus the trading.
Yeah, minus the trading, and so that's part of it. Like, so they haven't necessarily advanced in the way that we would think of like technological advancement, but they put a lot more of their effort into art and culture than into technology.
Like a renaissance.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's explained also later why that happened. But they know the history. They're very smart, educated people with a thriving civilization that's just kept itself locked off from the world.
So basically Wakanda.
What's that? Oh,
Black
that's the Black Panther. Okay, so I actually haven't seen Black Panther.
Oh,
yet.
okay. Neither have I. So.
I intend to, though, because I hear it's very good. So in my version, they don't have all this fancy machines or all this fancy technology, which is part of what's kept them there, is they haven't been able to explore, but that's also because they've made the conscious choice to focus more on building a culture and philosophy. Like, they have their own philosophy. It's a very rich civilization. It just doesn't have it, and also because they didn't invent a way of like steam-powered technology. That's the other difference. So when they're there, and the other difference is Kida is actually Queen of Atlantis.
Yay!
So, and her father is sort of like he's sick and he's old. He's no longer king, but he's still alive. But Kida is the one who welcomes them in, and she's very curious to know about the world outside, because they know that there's they know that there is other places that are out there. They are aware of the fact that they are underground and have been there for thousands of years and haven't left. And any attempts that have been made for people, and this is how I get around the whole dilemma with the Shepherd Journal. Someone actually did leave Atlantis at one point and met someone above ground and shared this information with him. And but any attempts from any explorers that they've had to go find the outside world have failed. People have left but have never come back. Yeah. So it's not, so they're a thriving civilization that's just stuck where it is. But Kida's curious about the outside world, but her father is hesitant. He's like, I don't know if I completely trust the motives of these people. But Kida welcomes them all the same. And then there's a period of them actually staying there and getting to know them. And Milo is able to act as the translator. So yeah, they don't speak each other's languages. Milo is the only one who speaks Atlantean, and he essentially acts as a translator for everyone. And people get to the point where they're speaking enough where they can have somewhat of a conversation. So a lot of time passes.
So we're talking like a good month or so.
Like a good month or so. Eventually Whitmore, he's there, like, he keeps asking, like, where's this power source? Where's this power source? And they're, in mine, they actually show it to him. They're like, oh, well, let's show you this cool thing we have.
You just pull out a car battery.
Yeah. Yeah. And in mine, it's not this big floating ball of energy. It's like an actual, like a crystal or something that is like buried in the ground that you could actually mine and harvest. But they're like, this is it. So eventually, after spending enough time, Mr. Whitmore holds the royal family hostage in the palace. So that's the other thing. They're greatly outnumbered by the Atlanteans, but they hold the royal family hostage. It's kind of mirroring what the conquistadors did with, I think it was Montezuma.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Apparently, that's what happened.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
also, even though Whitmore is in charge, this is also Rourke and Helga and his crew.
Oh, yeah. So they're in it too, but Whitmore's the one who's essentially calling the shots. But they were aware of this going to happen. They thought they were just going to get an energy source, and they still have the same conversation where they're going, "There's people here. There weren't supposed to be people here. This changes everything."
Now we're taking something from people. Yeah,
exactly. And Whitmore says, "Well, does it change anything? No, I don't think it needs to." And so later, they hold everyone hostage. Kida loses Milo's trust, and Milo is angry with Mr. Whitmore, and Mr. Whitmore says, "Okay, Milo, think about, like, your grandfather was a grave robber. He was stealing things from tombs of people who once lived.
Oh, so like a reversal of the prologue.
Yeah.
Where
and he's
Whitmore asked him if he was a grave robber.
Yeah.
And now he's like flipped it. That's awesome.
And now he's saying, so Milo, just think about it. Like, these people don't exist to the world. The world doesn't know these people exist. What's going to happen is we are going to take that energy source. And in my case, it's not the energy source is keeping them alive.
Yeah,
it's
that's
the energy
dumb.
source. The energy source is essentially, it was what created the original force field that allowed them to, that protected the city from the flood.
Yeah.
But it is required that it does need to stay there for them to survive, because if it goes away, then the weight of the ocean will
collapse in on them.
Collapse in on them. And Milo says, like, well, you can't do this. And Mr. Whitmore says, like, well, think about it. Like, the world doesn't know they exist. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go back. If you don't agree with me, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to leave you here. And I'm going to tell everyone that you died in the ocean. And it was a tragic thing that happened, but history is written by the victors. And if you don't come with me, you're just going to be lost to history.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Kita can see that Milo wasn't a part of this, so she eventually regains trust with him, and together they hatch a plan to... This is where my pitch becomes a little... I hadn't got all the details quite sorted out, but they basically figure out a way to fight against Mr. Whitmore and stop him from stealing the crystal. But part of that involves... I wanted, in my version, Milo to have to make a really... to actually have to make a choice where he was either going to be able to get what he wants and do the wrong thing, or not get what he want and did the right thing. So in my case, he has the option of going to the surface with all this evidence of Atlantis, but it would involve the destruction of this society. So in my version, what he has to do is he has to stop Mr. Whitmore, and then he decides what he can do is basically they can close off the entrance to Atlantis so that no one can ever go to Atlantis again. And so this is in the end, this is what they decide to do in the end. So he actually, they stop Mr. Whitmore, but in the process, he closes the entrance to Atlantis.
Trapping them inside.
Keeping Atlantis there, and returns to the surface, and everyone who goes back with him decides, we are not going to tell the world about what we found. We are going to keep it a secret from everyone. Okay. So he returns to the surface, returns to the university, and they say, what did you find? And he goes, it was a failed expedition. We didn't find anything.
Mr. Whitmore says this, or Milo says this?
Milo says this. Mr. Whitmore dies tragically in the process.
Tragically, air quotes.
All the bad guys die
because it's Disney.
Bad guys, and they return to the surface, and Milo doesn't have any evidence for anything, but he went knowing he found it. He knows it exists.
Yeah.
But now he knows that it's there, and no one's going to go and find it, and no one's going to try and use this.
So even though he didn't he wasn't able to prove that his grandfather was right, he knows it himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I have first after listening to your pitch, the way you include Mr. Whitmore in the expedition, I kind of want to make a shift to my pitch now. Okay. And that's Mr. Whitmore in my pitch. So now Mr. Whitmore comes with them. But we keep sort of seeing Rourke and Helga always talking to each other, and they kind of do shifty eye things, you know what I mean? So it appears to be that Rourke and Helga are conspiring something, but then at the end it turns out to be Mr. Whitmore. Just a bit of a thing there. So in regards to your pitch, I wonder actually if you know how the Atlanteans keep trying to say we've tried to explore but we can't seem to get out. Mm-hmm. I wonder if it might be interesting to say the Leviathan wasn't keeping people out of Atlantis; it was keeping the Atlanteans in.
Oh, that's interesting.
By destroying the Leviathan, the Atlanteans can now go out.
Oh, that's interesting. So now their passage is opened up. Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could definitely rearrange your pitch around it a little bit, but I just wondered, because when you were why can't they leave? And I was like, well, what if the reason they can't leave is actually the Leviathan, and now that they've removed it, the Atlanteans can actually like go out into the world.
I like that. That's a really good solution, actually. Yeah. I like the other thing I realize about my pitch that I didn't explain is I didn't explain how Atlantis became submerged in the first place. And my thinking was that it has something similar to yours, where they were basically messing with nature. They found a way to harness this thing, and it created their own destruction. So part of why they chose to stay and focus on culture instead of technology was because the last time they worked on technology, it destroyed them, and they knew we have to preserve this. And they are this actually, and this is why Milo loves their civilization so much, is because they have somehow managed to maintain this equilibrium. Where it's so one of the other things, interestingly, in my research, one of the things that came up was Thomas More's Utopia.
Yep. And
that one of the theories was that was influenced by some of the ideas around Atlantis. And so in my version of Atlantis is actually like very much the closest you could get to a utopia.
Yeah.
Where they found a way to create a society. It's not perfect. There's still problems, but because of their situation, they know how volatile it is. So they have to be very careful of how they use their resources, about how they manage everything. And they've made a very conscious effort to focus on maintaining an understanding of history, then instead of expanding and creating more technology that could bring about their demise.
I also think it's interesting that because you could have it because the Leviathan is keeping them in. If you wanted a different kind of twist at the end, just to switch things up, it turns out like the Leviathan was created and as being powered by the same energy source that the Atlanteans are using, but it's being powered and controlled by the old king.
Okay.
And the reason is because the reason that Atlantis is a utopia is because it doesn't need technology to or anything like that to create an army, because there's no one to fight with.
Right.
No one knows they're there and they can't get out. And so as long as they stay in, they have no need to create weapons. So the Leviathan was created as a means to stop them from needing weapons.
I like that.
Because a utopia only exists if there's nothing to threaten the utopia. As soon as you have something to threaten the utopia, then you have to protect the utopia. Then you need some kind of military, and then it's not a utopia.
Right, exactly.
So
I like that.
Yeah, the reason that works is that's really interesting. Wow. I also thought it was really interesting in both of our pitches that we both went about the reading plot hole in two different ways. I basically said that the flood that happens in mine is an actual flood. They're not protected by anything. They just happen to be alive. Because I think part of the thing that's really, really cool about Atlantis as a myth is that it's fun to believe that a flood could happen and that there could be survivors somewhere.
Right.
And so in mine, perhaps maybe they used the machine to protect themselves or use their technology to protect themselves, but I really wanted to emphasize that it was a collapse of a society caused by their own hubris, by their own pride. An Icarus flying to the sun, if you will.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know necessarily about yours, but I do think it's interesting that we went about it in two different ways to get around the whole reading plot hole, because that was dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
And we also
that was a problem.
We also both didn't like the fact that they live for 1,000 years or like many thousands of years. I was like, why? Why do you need that?
It's unnecessary. It's really unnecessary. I think because they were trying to tie it back into the beginning, but then it's like, well, if you remove the beginning entirely, in my case, then it doesn't matter. Like they can just have continued to have a society that.
I also like the idea of the prologue being Whitmore and like actually getting the journal. I think that sets up a really nice prologue.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder if I stole that from there was a video game. There was an Atlantis video game, and that's actually I think one of the first levels is you going to Iceland to find the journal.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I just remembered what the third plot hole is.
Uh-huh.
The third plot hole is when the Heart of Atlantis leaves, like as they're dragging Kita away, you see all their like dangly pendant necklaces stop glowing.
Uh-huh.
And yet they're still able to power the machines.
Yeah.
But if the energy source isn't there, how are the crystals seem to be some kind of like transducer? Like the energy from the heart is, transduced into the crystal, which is then, put into the machines that they have. But if the heart isn't there, how are they still flying the fish? Ugh.
Yeah, I thought it was some like proximity thing, like it's close enough, and then if they get the crystals close to it, then it works again.
I guess. I don't know. But
I agree, though.
It's a bit soft, but yeah. Final thoughts.
I think we should. I hope Netflix listens to this and decides to do a TV series,
An
and
animated TV series.
We could combine our ideas to make an epic Atlantis TV series.
That would be so sick. Disney, Netflix, somebody hit us up because
or the Disney Netflix, which is
Disney
coming out.
Plus, I think it's called.
Well, yeah, that one.
Yeah,
but they wouldn't go for it. I think somebody should just
pay us to write movies.
I think our version would be is I would want to do something that's a little bit darker.
Yeah, because television nowadays, including children's television, isn't afraid to go to a darker place.
Yeah.
So I think the message that we still have could be a dark message, but as long as you have, sort of, especially with today's television, like I'm talking about things that I've seen where it's been like, let's deal with darker subject matter, but still have an uplifting and hopeful message.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what we would do.
Right. What would be a kid's show that deals with that?
Avatar: The Last Airbender is a classic example.
That's a great example.
But lately, that's a great example of like an epic adventure that I would definitely base this off of. But another example of more comedic would be Gravity Falls. It deals with the whole thing is it doesn't treat the children like they're stupid. Even My Little Pony to some extent. Friendship is Magic, the new My Little Pony.
I never watched My Little Pony, but Gravity Falls definitely is like. Well, I watched that. It's like a quote unquote kid. It's a quote unquote kid show, but I love it.
And there are many out there. There are many shows out there that have like an ongoing adventure. So my current favorite is called Star versus the Forces of Evil, which it's a kids show, but then you watch it and like the way they deal with like grown up problems, the way they deal with relationships in that show, the way there's another one on Netflix right now called The Dragon Prince, and that show is like it's incredible. The way that these shows are still children's shows but deal with mature content, I think that's exactly what this show needs to be.
Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I think it could be that definitely.
I definitely
keep within what we just talked about. Yeah,
I honestly don't even think like if you just took the movie we got and sort of fleshed it out, you could even and get rid of a few plot holes. You could even create an excellent TV series.
I think so too. I would love to see that.
I would watch the shit out of that. But
I would totally watch the shit out of that. I would. Yeah.
All right, dude. Where can we catch you on social media?
It's at Nate Draper. That's at Twitter, and on Instagram, it's also Draper Nate.
Nice.
It's flipped.
As always, you can catch us on Facebook, CineMasters Ultimate Timeline, on YouTube, or wherever else you watch your podcast. And just one last push. If you want to hear some amazing music by yours truly, you can find me on Facebook, Robot Philosopher, or on YouTube. Again, that's Robot Philosopher. And, yeah.
Have a good one, y'all.
Take it easy.